Richard Branson. Welcome. Welcome so much. Thank you very much. Good. All right. And here's Miles.
All right, sit down, make yourself comfortable. Thank you, David, and thank you all for being here this morning. You just flew in from Las Cruces, and boy, are your arms tired. You had quite a show yesterday. Tell us how it went. Tell us what you were doing at the spaceport in New Mexico.
Well, it was, a historic day. We just finished building this beautiful-looking spaceport right out in the middle of the desert, and
kind of looks like a stingray.
What's that?
It looks like a stingray, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's maybe a stingray. I never thought of that, but it looks, anyway, out of this world, which it should, but it fits in really well in the desert, and that's where the whole space program is going to be launched from. So, how many people put their hands up?
Yeah, who wants to go?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
As long as we've
who's your bosses? Can we get your salaries up quick, please?
Everyone needs a raise here, I think. So, all right. I should tell you, I've got my Twitter feed open. @MilesO'Brien is my address on Twitter, and if you want to chime in with a question or a comment as we talk here, I'm going to guess this crowd has a lot of portable mobile devices. Safe to say? All very well secured, I'm sure, as well, too. So let's talk about how things are going. You have 455 people on the wait list, maybe 456 or 7 today, who knows, who have put down some money for this. How soon before they get to fly? I know you and your family had planned a Christmas 2012 vacation to space. Is that going to happen?
I think so. I think we'll be finished and ready for next Christmas, and my kids have reached an age where they love to experience some of the adventures that I do together. So I'm very, very lucky as a father to be able to share these kinds of wonderful things with Holly and Sam. And then the following year, we should take more people to space in that 1 year on a commercial spaceship company than NASA and the Russians have taken to space in the last 70 years. So.
I know you know the number, but we should tell the crowd here that basically in the entire history of the space age, about 50 years or so, only about 500 people have gone to space.
Yeah.
And your wait list is about that length, right?
Yeah, I mean, by the end of this year, it will be 500. And I think our real challenge, I mean, the price these people are paying is not cheap. I mean, they are the pioneers. They're paying a couple $100,000 to go to space. But that's roughly the same price as it costs to cross the Atlantic in a Pan Am plane in the 20s. And they were the pioneers of transatlantic travel. I'm willing to forecast today that the people in this room's children, 20 years from now, they'll be thinking, should we go on holiday this year? Or shall we go off into space? I mean, and that we'll be able to get the level of the costs down to a level where, most people's kids here will become astronauts. I mean, which is a fantastically exciting thing to think about.
Well, can you imagine in 1925 talking with somebody who is, flying airmail and saying someday there'll be a jumbo jet that will take you across the ocean? They would think you were crazy. So. This is probably a pretty good analogy to where we are in the space program. I guess the question is, and I've seen you talk about this a little bit, can you ever see this as becoming a means of transportation, suborbital flights from New York to Tokyo, for example? Is that possible?
Yeah, I have to hold our engineers back at the moment. I mean, they're everywhere. It's like me. I'm always wanting to move on to the next project, but I'm just saying, look. We've got to finish our space project first. But I mean, the whole team of wonderful engineers that work at Virgin Galactic, they believe it will be possible to create spaceships that pop out into space and pop back down. I'm off to Australia tonight, so it's going to take me 21 hours. These engineers say that they may well be able to do it so it could take 1.5 hours from, from Las Vegas to Australia. And I'm very much hoping that they can achieve that in our lifetimes, which would be spectacular. And what a ride.
What a ride that would be.
The only problem is the airport. I mean, by the time you got through security, it's 1.5 hours.
The TSA will take longer than the flight. Yeah. Let's, in September, end of September, you had a glide test. You've had about 16 of them, I think. And that was a real nail biter. It descended much more steeply than you anticipated. And in the end, it proved how safe the craft is as you were able to feather it and everybody landed safely. Just tell us a little bit about that and give us a little insight into the challenges that you have encountered along the way here. It's a little bit harder than it looks, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're building a spaceship program from scratch, and NASA, in building their spaceship program, they had challenges. I mean, they lost 3% of their customers, generally speaking, at the re-entry stage. That's completely unacceptable. If you're a commercial spaceship company, we have to, we cannot afford to lose our customers because we may not get new customers. So. Offering return tickets rather than one-way tickets is quite important. But we have, brave test pilots, who, are putting the aircraft through their paces, and in the process, they push them to extreme situations, and they might find the aircraft spins out of control because they've really pushed it, and but the great thing about this spaceship is it's got backup mechanisms, and it can and all the backup mechanisms have worked, and I think by the time we finally fly passengers in 15 months' time, we will have done many flights and many flights into space, and obviously we hope it goes without anybody getting hurt.
We have a tweet here. Do you envision space hotels in the near-term future?
We have been working on a Virgin Space Hotel. The idea is to build it not on the moon, but just off the moon, and there would be these lovely glass pods, which would be your bedrooms, which you would sleep in, and as you go around the moon, and then we'd have tiny little spaceships, where you could go off for a day ride around the moon, and we could.
So this would be the place where you enter the 250,000-mile high club. And who would get to be first for that?
Look, my company's called Virgin. I don't know.
I see the business opportunity. There is no doubt.
Okay, this Virgin may go the whole way. We'll see.
All right, so Virgin Galactic, it's crazy, it's wild, outrageous, and it's fun. That's you, isn't it?
Yeah, I love to be. I think all of us really would love to be crazy, outrageous, and have fun, and push the limits. And life's a lot more fun, when you do that. And I suppose I'm in, a fairly unique position where I can, set myself these fantastic challenges and try to make them possible.
So, as we said in the introduction, you were not a good student. You're dyslexic. You struggled in school. Were it not for that fact, you probably would have stayed in school, and you come from a long line of barristers. You would probably today be a barrister in the city, in bespoke and rather anonymous. Is that possible?
It's certainly possible. I mean, I quit school at 15. The Vietnamese War was raging. I'm afraid, it was another war that we should never have fought, and I wanted to start a magazine to campaign against it. Even those who started the war, when they got into their 80s, said that it was a dreadful mistake that they'd made. And so, left school to launch a magazine to campaign against, issues that I felt strongly about, and, managed to pay for the cost of the magazine by selling enough advertising to cover the printing and the paper costs. So managed to self-finance it, and it became my education. I mean, just getting out there in the real world and learning the art of survival.
Tell us a little bit about, you grew up son of a barrister, obviously, and your mother in particular had a big impact on you in challenging you. And that, I think, has a lot to do with the kind of person you came to be, obviously. Tell us a little bit, just give us a couple of anecdotes, or a anecdote, about how your mother, I think in one occasion, sort of left you far from home and made you figure out how to get back, that kind of thing. You'd probably be arrested for child abuse these days, but go ahead, explain the story.
You just told it.
Okay, next.
My mum, actually, who's with me on this trip, and she said, "Can I come and watch you talk?" And I said, "Look, you've heard me talk before. You go and do some shopping." Anyways, she believed in bringing us up. Not to watch other people doing things, but to do things ourselves. She wouldn't let us watch television. We had to be out there climbing trees, or just doing useful things, as she would put it. And yes, she didn't want to mamby-pamby us, as she said. So there was the famous occasion where I was going to my grandmother's house, and she pushed me out of the car 4 miles before I got there. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and got completely lost and ended up in a farmhouse. And as you say, she definitely would have got arrested today. So, but somehow we survived, and I think we benefited from most of her. Most of her. She was a terrible cook. I mean, she was such a bad cook, and she would not let us get down until we'd eaten her dreadful food. And there was a drawer on the table, which all the youngians used to go in, and it was only when we moved house that this drawer fell open, and this mouldy lot of onions was discovered.
All the stuff that wasn't eaten. Do you parent the same way with Sam and Holly?
Well, my wife won't allow me to try to kill my children. I think my wife's very down to earth. Working class Glaswegian, fantastic mum, and I think she most likely would have been overly protective, and so I think they've managed to get the right sort of balance, and but the kids have now grown up to being, they're going to come to space with me on the first spaceship next. We did the transatlantic attempt to be the fastest across the boat in a sailing boat. We're about to kite surf across the English Channel together. So they've got slightly more my side when it comes to the adventure side. In
the mold. So if they were to come to you, Sam or Holly, and say, "I want to fly a balloon around the world," or whatever, you'd say, "Fine."
Yeah, I love them. I would not want to lose them, but equally, I think you only live once, and I think, you living life to its full is good. And obviously I would, just like I do in business, try to protect against the downside, try to look at all the worst things that can happen, try to make sure that that we've thought all the worst things through, and that there's backup, there's as many backups as possible. But but I think if you say yes in life, life is far more rewarding than if you say no.
In your autobiography, you begin. It's actually very emotional to read as a parent. With a letter that you're writing before one of your around-the-world balloon attempts, a letter you wrote to your kids to be read upon your demise. And it's any parent reading this would have a hard time with it. I suspect you're not the kind of person that is often filled with doubt. But at that moment, did you think twice?
Oh, of course. I mean, I remember actually climbing into one of the balloons, and my 10-year-old son suddenly burst into tears, and you're heading off around the world in a balloon, across the Atlas Mountains, across Mount Everest, across K2, And you know, yeah, it's you know, I love my children and would absolutely hated it not to have come back. You know, and I'm sure that some parents in the audience will think that one was being slightly selfish to have done it, and that's possibly true. But you know, but I suppose my feeling in life is, you know, that if things have not been achieved, like, you know, I mean, we were the first to cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon, and then we were the first to cross the Pacific in a hot air balloon, and then we were determined to be the first to fly around the world in a hot air balloon. We had, you know, magnificent experiences, and you know, by developing the technology to do these things, you sometimes find, you know, big breakthroughs come about from trying to push the limits. So sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. But anyway, we did survive. I mean, I think I have the record for being pulled out of the sea the most times by a helicopter, 5 times.
You're a virtual teabag. So,
and therefore, to get to say thank you to the, we now sponsor the ambulance helicopter service in London. So we sort of hopefully paid back a bit.
I was talking a few years ago to a shuttle astronaut about this issue that the day they strap into the shuttle, which is, you know, just the climax of their career, the absolute peak, the finest moment of their lives career-wise, is absolutely the biggest nightmare for their families. You know, there's this dichotomy. That had to be the same for you and your family when you were doing these adventures.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was as a big nightmare for my wife. I mean, I think, you know, she would, you know, come on, go.
Get on with it.
If you're going to be stupid enough to go and want to try to kill yourself, just make sure that the island is signed over to me before you go. Unfortunately, I think in those days the kids were young enough maybe not to fully realize the full implications. So I think now it's really tough for my wife because the kids insist on coming with me on these adventures, and yeah, that's not easy for her.
All right, I want to move into your business career a little bit, but before we do that, there's a great video which kind of puts it all, the Virgin story, boils it down into 3 minutes. So let's watch that, and then we'll continue our conversation.
Everybody at Virgin love a challenge. I think what Virgin is about is taking on big conglomerates and moving into their territory and seeing if we can shake them up. We've managed to do that in the music business, we've managed to do that in the aviation business, in the mobile phone business, and I think that where the people who work for Virgin get their passion from is being proud of the company they work for, being proud of the difference that Virgin's making.
Concentrating on the area in front of my feet, aren't you?
It's where I feel comfortable. common service because we rock.
Screw it, let's do it.
What a great video. That's fantastic. You're still having fun, aren't you?
I must be older than I thought. I just sing all that. Anyway, no, look, I have an absolute blast. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be a sad person if I wasn't having the greatest fun.
Okay, let's go back to Student Magazine. You've always been ahead of your time. You were ahead of your time in the sense you were losing money in the publishing business. It was Student. So that led you to the music business. Explain that transition a little bit to people.
Well, first of all, I've never thought of myself as a business person. And I think actually people who think of themselves as business people most likely are not going to be that successful. Throughout my life, what I've tried to do is create things for a reason. So, Student Magazine I started in order to have a voice, in order to make a difference. Music, I mean, a friend of mine had a tape, absolutely loved his music, but people refused to put it out. He was 15 years old, he played all the instruments himself. So, so I went to the record companies, nobody would put it out, so I decided, well, screw it, let's set up our own record company and put it out. And it actually happened to be very successful. And then since then we started signing other bands that we liked, and we built maybe the most successful independent record label of its time. Particularly excited when we finally signed the Rolling Stones, which was something that
But that wasn't easy, was it, to land them? You tried to land them several times.
I tried to sign them several times, but anyway, don't give up.
Now,
and I think, just throughout my life, the businesses that we've set up have all come from, maybe frustration. I mean, we went into the airline business because, I hated the experience of flying on other people's airlines. I felt, I did fly a lot on other people's airlines, and I felt I could create the kind of airline that I'd like to fly on. Great entertainment, great staff, people, cabin crew that actually smiled, et cetera, et cetera. And if I liked it, then other people would like it. And that's, every move that Virgin's made has often come out of a personal, frustration that surely that could be done better than it's been done.
it's a good thing your first choice for a name for the company did not take, because I think you might not have 455 people waiting to fly on Slipped Disc Galactic. So
yeah, no,
Slipped Disc was cute, but Virgin was brilliant, right, as a brand. How did that happen?
Well, I was 15 years old. And I was sitting around in the basement.
This is really a tell-all, isn't it?
Yeah, there were a number of other young girls, let's call them 16.
Everything was legal.
And one of them jokingly said, "Well, we're all virgins. Why don't and laughed and said, why don't we call the company Virgin?" And so it was either, we sort of tossed a coin. It was either going to be Slip Disc Records or Slip Disc Airlines. And as you rightfully say, Slip Disc Airlines, I think, or Slip Disc for spaceship companies or whatever, just wouldn't have worked.
Wouldn't have worked so well.
No.
Tell me a little bit about one of the crucial turning points for you in the music business was Mike Oldfield and Tubular Bells, which is a classic album from the 70s. If you're of the age, you know it. This might be too young a crowd, I don't know. But how important was that, and how difficult was it to build a record label? Because you referred to the Rolling Stones and how difficult it was to land that act. It seems to me it's kind of like putting together a sports team. It's hard to get the stars.
Yeah, well, you do need some lucky breaks in life if you're, building businesses from scratch. And our lucky break was signing Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which he was 15, I was 16, and as I said, nobody else would put his music out. We put it out, and people absolutely loved it. And I think a lot of people got stoned on it. So It and Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd were the two massive sellers at the time. And I think, fortunately, we took risks. We signed the Sex Pistols at a time when nobody else would touch them. We got prosecuted for the name of the album sleeve, never mind the bollocks, here's the Sex Pistols, which the police decided the word bollocks was rude. And it's quite a funny story, actually. I mean, obviously, the police thought the word bollocks was...
But you actually consulted a linguist to find out what bollocks means, right?
Well, the lawyer that we got said that he would defend us for free because he thought it was ridiculous that they were prosecuting us. And a famous QC, and he said, look, find a linguistics expert. So I rang Nottingham University, which was the town we were being prosecuted in, and the professor of linguistics answered the phone, and I said, could you tell me what the word bollocks means? And they said, well, the police obviously think it's a derivative of balls, but they're wrong. It's the word bollocks is a nickname that was given to priests in the 18th century, and they talked because they talked a load of rubbish. So basically, the album means never mind the priests, here's the Sex Pistols, or never mind the rubbish, here's the Sex Pistols. So I said, well, would you mind coming to court? And he said he'd be happy to do so. And then the punchline came. He said, I happen to be a priest myself. Would you like me to wear my dog collar? So somehow we got off.
Couldn't make that one up. That was, that case dismissed at that point. The gavel comes down. Okay, a lot of us here have had bad experiences on airlines, but we don't go out and lease a 747 for a year, which is what you did. I found it interesting that you got some counsel from Sir Freddie Laker, who pioneered low-cost seats across the Atlantic. And I'm curious, first of all, you didn't do exactly what he did, because obviously it didn't work out in the end for him. But I'm also curious who you admire, who you consult. Do you find yourself looking for advice frequently as you engage in new business ventures?
I think the best leaders are the best listeners. I think people who get out and people who get out and listen. The best. We've got a wonderful organisation of elders that we work with, and they're fantastic listeners. So I'm listening all the time. I'm taking notes all the time. I'm listening in particular from the people who work with me, because they know what's going on. They know the feedback from the customers. If I fly on a Virgin airline, I make sure I don't sit. I'm up and walking about, meeting all the customers, meeting all the staff, taking notes, making sure that the next day I deal with those notes. If I'm down route in San Francisco, where I will be tonight, I'll make sure that I go to the same bar that the staff drink at, and by the end of the evening, if I haven't taken those notes, I won't remember the next morning what they told me. But it's very, very important to be a good listener.
You're a delegator, a listener, and you also have an incredible sense of paying attention to the details of the business. When I say all those three things, it sounds like that's three different people. How do you mix all of that together into a management style?
I don't think it need be contradictory. I mean, you know, from a very early age, I realized that the importance of delegation. So the moment you've got more than one company, you know, you have to learn, you have to delegate, and it's very important that you find people to run your companies who are wonderful motivators of people, who, you know, look for the best in people, who praise and don't criticize, and you know, who just genuinely care about people, and that's the kind of people that, you know, run the various Virgin companies. It's very important that I don't try to second guess those people. I mean, you've got to give them the freedom to make mistakes as well as to make good things, and you know, hopefully I'm good at that. At the same time, you know, if I'm you know, when I'm traveling the world, I do go out and visit all the various Virgin companies, and I do, you know, make lists of, you know, sometimes quite minute little things, and I think it's getting all those little things right that make for an exceptional airline or an exceptional health club or an exceptional train company, or, you know, it's the moment management start getting lazy and they let those little things starting slip, that you just become a chain of hotels or you know, a big chain of restaurants. You've got to run your companies as if you are, you know, in a very personal way, and make sure that all those little details are sorted. And by sorting all those little details, and then you're giving your staff the tools to do the job well. Your staff can then be proud of the job they're doing. They can be proud of the brand they're working for. They can go out in the pubs in the evenings, and everybody, all their friends, you know, are proud of them because they work for that particular company that you know, that really excels. And the whole thing is a self-fulfilling, and you know, works well.
It's interesting because I read a recent opinion piece that you did in the wake of the death of Steve Jobs, who was a famous non-delegator, a person whom you admire. Before we talk about him, you were in a very illustrious group of people a few years back, the famous Think Different series of commercials that Apple did. And recently, it came to light that there was a version out there in Steve Jobs' voice, which I'm surprised they didn't release it that way in the first place. But let's watch it for a second.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Must be kind of nice to be among that illustrious group. I'm curious, there's actually a tweet here that plays off this nicely. Simon Cousins tweets, "What historical figures have inspired you?"
I think there's two that are alive today, that Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who, you know, who, I mean, with Nelson Mandela, he spent 28 years in prison. You know, he is released from prison. He becomes president of South Africa. He forgives his captors. He unites the country by having Archbishop Tutu set up a truth and reconciliation court where, if people had committed atrocities, instead of them being executed, they have to come and apologize to the families of the people they'd committed atrocities to. And in that way, they united South Africa, white and black. It's become one nation, one great nation. And they, I've had the privilege of working with them on a wonderful project called The Elders, and getting to know them really well. And they are truly incredible people. And perhaps, and to me, the most incredible people on earth today. May they live long lives.
Let's go back to Steve Jobs for a minute. For every bit of fun you have, he was serious. For every bit of delegation you have, he was maniacal in controlling every aspect of his brand. And yet, the end result is kind of the same in the public's view, that you have a face that is just interwoven with a brand, with a tremendous amount of success associated with that. We're just beginning to learn now what the loss of Steve Jobs means to the Apple brand. Will Virgin exist without Richard Branson?
Well, it's interesting in the music business. When one of our artists died, we found the sales, multiplied. So hopefully the same will happen at Virgin. Slightly more serious answer. I think that that Steve Jobs and myself have spent our lifetimes building a global brand, a brand that, I set out to build the most respected brand in the world, not necessarily the biggest brand. And I suspect Apple's ahead of us at the moment, but we'll see how we go. So I think the brand, both the Virgin brand, the Apple brand, they're brands that stand on their own, and they no longer need the Steve Jobs and the Richard Bransons to help push them forward. I think companies do benefit from having front people, and so at Virgin we'll try to maybe my daughter, maybe my son, maybe somebody else will take the baton forward and be the face of Virgin, because I think it's good to have a face. I think people relate to companies that have a face, and it's sad that with the Steve Jobs, his kids are very young, and maybe Apple won't they won't have a face, so it'll be a little bit more difficult for them. But but I'm sure that the team at Apple will do everything they can to try to make sure his legacy continues for many years to come.
We don't want to speak ill of those who have just passed, but I'd love for you to comment on that management style of his. And is that the way to run a business in your view?
Well, Steve had a very different kind of management style, one that that I certainly wouldn't recommend, but it happened to work extremely well. I mean, he was very autocratic. He was
so the end justifies the means?
Does the end justify the means? I think it depends what the means are. I mean, I don't think Steve Jobs was was cruel or anything like that. He was just he just would not delegate. All the minutiae he wanted to be involved in, and his personality was not necessarily a great people's person. Having said that, he was such a genius that people wanted to work for him, and he managed to get people to work for him, and and achieved absolutely remarkable things.
I once worked with the.
I've left my jacket at the back. There's a lot of. Could somebody get me my jacket?
You need a jacket? You're getting cold?
Yeah.
Want this one? You want
No, it's all right.
I've got a spacesuit back there.
What's that?
I got a spacesuit.
Oh, the spacesuit will be good.
Yeah.
Air conditioning's good in here.
Yeah. Let's take a tweet from Dennis London. Looking back on your career, what's the one missed business opportunity that got away, if you will?
Thank you very much. That's great. Sorry, just making sure the microphone's still there. Yep.
Still good to go.
I've had numerous things that have got away. I had when I'm lucky enough to, I suppose, be in the position where these things. But I had a friend of mine call me and said he was playing this board game, and that we really should try to sign the rights for the world outside Canada, and that the rights were available. And I said, well, I can get to Canada on Friday. And he said, well, I would get out there right away if I was you. It's such a great game. And I thought, well, it's not going to make any difference Friday to Wednesday. And anyway, the rights got signed off to somebody else on the Thursday, and that was Trivial Pursuits. So that was a bad one. There was anyway. There's quite a few.
There's been a few, but I guess that's the nature of the business. Some of them, I guess, will get away.
I think the interesting thing is that we're not adverse to trying things, and we try a lot of things, and we're not adverse to the falling flat on our face, and so my own feeling is that we just love giving things a go. Some things succeed, and if they don't succeed, we learn from it. There was a time where we took on Coca-Cola, and we thought, we'll knock Coca-Cola into number 2 position in the world, and one day nobody will have heard of Coca-Cola. And we arrived in Times Square in an English Sherman tank, we had rigged up the Coca-Cola sign the night before with pyrotechnics to explode, or look like it had exploded at the same time that we fired the tank. And the tank fired, the Coca-Cola sign went up. By the way, this was before 9/11, when people weren't quite so sensitive about people firing tanks in Times Square.
Another thing that would not happen today.
I think it might not have happened today. But anyway, so for about a year, Virgin Cola was out selling Coca-Cola in the UK. We were having great fun, and our troops were rolling out. And then somebody at Coca-Cola woke up to this little brand, and they just decided to squash us. And they got massive SWAT teams were sent out around the world, and anywhere that Virgin was stocked, suddenly the retailer got a lot of money for destocking us, and they jumped on us. We're still number 1 in Bangladesh, but
in certain neighborhoods. So this is a theme that comes up time and again, given the nature of what you do as a small, upstart, cheeky, attention-seeking brand. And in the case of the airline, British Airways, in the case of the train lines, it's been the government rail system in the UK. It's predictable, but it really can be difficult to overcome this David and Goliath challenge. Goliath wins a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, with Coca-Cola, they won. British Airways tried similar. I mean, British Airways waged a really dirty tricks campaign to try to put us out of business, and they had put out of business by waging similar wars. Dan Air Europe, British Caledonian, Sir Freddie Laker, numerous airlines before us. Freddie Laker, when I sat down with him and said, look, you've been driven out of business by BA, I'm starting off with one second-hand 747, do I have any chance of survival? And it was he that just said, look, use yourself to get yourself on the front pages of the papers, to get that brand, your Virgin brand. You're never going to be able to advertise them. Use yourself, make a fool of yourself, do everything you can to get the Virgin brand out there. And then there's 3 other words I would recommend to you. Sue the bastards.
Because he was reluctant to do so, and that hurt him, right?
He sued after the event, and he got $10 million. So he retired on the $10 million and lived a happy last few years of his life, but would much rather have been running his airlines. So when British Airways started the Dirty Tricks campaign against us, and it involved them going through my rubbish bins outside my house to try to find any incriminating evidence against me, going through the rubbish bins of our nightclubs to see if they could find any needles to prove that people might be taking drugs in our nightclubs. I mean, they went to extraordinary lengths. They had a computer set up where they were illegally accessing our computer information. They were then ringing up our passengers, pretending to be from Virgin, and saying that our plane had been cancelled, but as a good Virgin employee, we could switch you on to British Airways. Anyway, extraordinary things. And we took them to court, and we won the biggest damages ever. And from that moment, we didn't look back. I mean, British Airways were on the back foot, and Virgin, grew into a formidable competitor to them.
And today, all those people are hackers, right? So
today, what? I missed that.
A tweet. How do you find the courage to overcome obstacles in life?
Well, I suppose, in some of my balloon trips, there was one balloon trip where we were crossing the Pacific, and we'd lost 3/4 of our fuel in an electrical fault, and we had 7,000 miles still to go, and we calculated that with the fuel left, we would have to average 190 miles an hour. The fastest the balloon had ever been was about 80 miles an hour. And it was incredibly lonely, few seconds when that dawned, because, it was basically we were facing, almost certain death. I mean, it was really almost impossible for us to get out of.
No chopper in this case, right?
I mean, the Gulf War had broken out that morning. We were on our own. And the Pacific is one of the loneliest places out there. There's only Hawaii. And that's a little dot in the Pacific, and there was a force 8 gale blowing. There's no way that ships would have been able to turn around, and we didn't look good. And I think if I hadn't been trained through my life to confront issues full on and fight to resolve entrepreneurial problems when there are difficulties, do everything I can to try to solve a business problem, work day and night to get it resolved. I may not have held myself together. So, but instead, just got into, my little aircraft seat in the balloon. We carried a British Airways aircraft seat rather than a Virgin Atlantic seat, so it would keep me awake. Anyway. Buckled in, and then knew I had 3 days where I couldn't. If I was lucky, I had 3 days where I had to just stay awake, fly the balloon right in the core of the jet stream, where the winds were strongest, and pray that I just could get winds of anything up near to 200 miles an hour. And I'm not an overtly religious person, but the speedometer started going, 80 miles an hour, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150. Suddenly, we were flying at 220 miles an hour, right in the core of this jet stream. And it was almost as if somebody had just taken the balloon. And we missed LA, which we were aiming for, by 2,500 miles. We ended up in the Arctic, but we hit a frozen lake, 700 miles from the nearest road, but we hit land, and it was we were very lucky to have survived it. Thank you for the question.
I want to talk about your commitment to altruism, which predates your tremendous wealth. You were involved in the days of Student Magazine in reaching out to young people with a counseling service, specifically focused on issues surrounding venereal disease and other matters. Matter of fact, that got you in trouble with the law, didn't it?
It did, yeah. another one of those rather strange court cases. In fact, bizarrely, I think that they prosecuted under exactly the same act, which was the 1889 Indecent Advertisements Act, for mentioning the word venereal disease in public. Terrible. So we had an organization that helped young people with various problems, you know, gay community, psychiatric problems, and you know, people who were pregnant, and obviously, you know, young people sometimes got venereal disease, and we would try to find the best clinics for them to go to, and it was a free help and advice center. And there was some ancient act, the 1916 Venereal Diseases Act and 1899 Indecent Advertisements Act said that it was illegal to mention the word venereal disease. So anyway, the court realized it was that the law was an arse, and the Reginald Maudling, the Home Secretary, actually wrote me a letter apologizing, and they changed the law. So now you can mention the word venereal disease and without getting prosecuted.
Well, at that time you were struggling to keep a magazine afloat, starting a record shop, moving into the music business. You would be forgiven if you were focused on that. What drove you to spend the time you spent on those endeavors, and why do you think that's important? It certainly has blossomed over the years.
Well, I was the lad of the 60s, and I think it was a time where young teenagers started realizing they were much better at, you know, looking after their fellow human beings. You know, if somebody was gay, realizing that, you know, you're born gay, that, you know, they became accepted in those days. And, you know, there wasn't the prejudices that there had been in previous years. And I think the 60s broke down those prejudices. And actually, I think just running that advisory center, you know, taught me a lot about, you know, human beings, and made me, you know, much more understanding and sympathetic of people less fortunate than myself. And you know, so I've tried to make sure that, you know, we run Virgin ethically, that we run Virgin as a force for good, that we're not, you know, a money-making machine. We are a group of companies that you know, really go out there and try to make a difference in the world. I'm actually putting out a book in 2 weeks' time called Screw Business as Usual, and you know, which is basically trying to get companies to run their companies in a way in which, you know, if they're small companies, you know, they try to tackle local issues. If they're bigger companies, they try to tackle national issues. If they're, you know, international companies, they try to tackle global issues, and they use their entrepreneurial skills to tackle these issues. And I think if every company can think like that and help the politicians, we can get on top of most of the major issues in the world, and it's great fun trying to do so.
Do corporations need more rule breakers, you think?
Do they need more?
Rule breakers, people that are not confined.
Yeah, I do think corporations need more rule breakers, and if they're going to get more rule breakers, they've got to be more forgiving of people who make mistakes, which corporations are not very forgiving of people who make mistakes.
In your companies, are people forgiven for mistakes?
I would very much hope so. I mean, you know, I urge our chief executives to do a lot of things, and sometimes I get my way, and sometimes I don't. You know, I've been urging them to try to be much more, you know, flexible with our workforces, in, you know, in things like part-time and job sharing, and you know, just trying to, you know, treat people as you treat your brothers or your sisters, and treat people in a very humane way. You know, the people, you know, I think if, for instance, if America were more flexible on, you know, in this room, if people were honest, there would be about 20% of people in this room who would actually love it if their company, if they weren't thought bad of at their company, to work 6 months a year rather than 12 months a year, and you know, it has more time with their children. You know, they would earn less money, but they would prefer that. Maybe their partner could make up the difference of that money. But by so doing, they would be enjoying the life that they want to enjoy. They would suddenly free up jobs for the 10% of unemployed people in America. You could sort out the unemployment problem almost overnight. So, so our companies are not perfect in that area. I'm working and trying to push them to become perfect in that area. I would urge all companies in America and around the world to, be more flexible, because I think that's one way where there are lack of jobs around, to give everybody what they want.
I could go for 6 months off. That'd be nice. Let's talk. I want to talk a little more about your altruism and activism, but we have a video I want to play first.
We can really make an incredible difference.
An idea that came about through the staff at Virgin, who thought, we're great at starting up successful businesses all over the world. Imagine what we could do if we focused all that energy, entrepreneurial talent, and our resources into making the world a better place.
To get a whole number of different partners, sometimes with different interests, to come together to make a difference.
Just knowing that someone will be there to catch you when you fall.
This group of elders will bring hope and wisdom back into the world.
We have been able, through their good offices, to get $18 million.
It's really inspiring to see a company pull together like this.
Yes, we can.
Well, just to say, log on to Virgin. I thought I could get that right.
Get involved. Log on to Virgin.
Asante sana. Virgin Unite.
Log on to virginunite.com.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So tell us, that's a fantastic video. You're into a lot of things with Virgin Unite. First of all, how much of your time is now spent on Unite?
I think about 80% of my time is now spent on setting up sort of not-for-profit organizations. The businesses run fine, and I think I get most of my satisfaction, or more of my satisfaction, from these not-for-profits.
You were recently at a climate change conference in the Maldives, or Maldives, I guess. And you were quoted as saying, you described climate change as the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity of our lifetime. What do you mean by that?
there's something like 95% of all scientists believe that the world has a major problem. I know there's a lot of skeptics in America, but that global warming is a reality. But whether global warming is a reality or not, we are fast running out of fossil fuels. And I think, with China growing at 10% and India growing at 10%, South America growing at 8%, and Africa now even growing at 5%, about 5 years from now, the demand for oil will exceed supply. So, fuel prices could go through the roof. So there's lots of reasons why we've got to come up with alternative fuels. And I just, think there are enormous opportunities for people to try to come up, to develop alternative fuels and save energy and create new forms of energy. And I mean, we use all the profits from our dirty businesses, our airline businesses, and invest them in trying to develop alternative fuels. And in fact, last week we announced quite a big breakthrough where a little company in New Zealand that we're working with has come up with a way of taking all the shit that goes up the chimneys from coal-fired power stations and aluminium plants and steel factories and turning it into aviation fuel. So saving 50% carbon output from planes. So it's trying to come up with breakthroughs like that I think are very exciting.
All right, this conversation is great. We're going to bring a couple other guests into the mix, but before I bring them up here, can I have a ride? Because certainly I think you need a little help publicizing your endeavors. What do you think?
Can you have a what?
A ride on Galactic.
A ride?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Do you have a check?
All right, a couple of guys in the wings who would like to ask a few questions as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage McAfee's co-presidents Michael DeCesar and Todd Gebhardt. Come on out. Right here.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Good to meet you. Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
All right.
Good job.
Todd, why don't you begin it? Yeah, I know you have a couple questions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm sure I'm only one of the few people that have said to you what an amazing person, amazing life you've had. You've built so many companies, so many different identities around the Virgin brand. You told us how you came up with the name. When you hear the word Virgin, what do you want us to think? What do you want us to think about that brand? And then how do you go about protecting it?
Well, how you go about protecting it is a really, really good question. I mean, we like to think that the Virgin brand is synonymous with, with quality, with good value, with fun, with innovation, and we won't go into a new business unless we feel it's going to have all those attributes and it's going to actually enhance all the Virgin brands that have come before it. How do you protect it? We try to make sure that we run our company ethically, that we don't make any moves where if we're going to wake up and if we make a move that that we'll be embarrassed about if we read about it in a newspaper, we just won't do it. So we imbue that in all the managing directors around the world. There will be mistakes, and I think the brand is big enough to cope with the occasional mistakes, as long as we move incredibly quickly and we admit there's a mistake. I mean, we're in the transportation business. I mean, thank God, in 28 years we've never had an airline accident. We had a train crash, which was actually no fault of our own, but some of the track which we didn't control was loose. I was on a skiing holiday. Made absolutely certain that I found a plane that got me to the accident. Within 2.5 hours of the accident, to meet the passengers, to go to the hospital, to confront it head on, and so how you manage a difficult situation like that. I mean, I even had to. There was one person killed in the accident. had to go to the morgue to comfort their relatives. And, so, and I think, people appreciated the fact that when I'd taken that trouble. So, so confronting head-on a problem like that is very important, I think.
Michael?
My turn. So you made your first fortune in the music business. The artists these days deal with digital rights management and the fact that it's so easy to download music and copy it to multiple devices. How do you see the music industry evolving as a result of that?
It's funny because when we had our record shops and our record label and I decided to go into the airline business, the critics, really criticized me for, they said, everything you're taught at a business school says stick with your onions, don't diversify, out of what you know. And anyway, we did, and we've carried on diversifying. But if we had actually stuck with our original business, Steve Jobs effectively would have put us out of business with the iPod and obviously the internet, because the music business, is pretty well dead as far as retail shops are pretty well all gone. Record labels are on their last feet. Live music will last forever, and Virgin puts on some I think quite fun live concerts. Music will never die. But people are not going to make the same kind of money out of it that they used to 15, 20 years ago. And also now there's just so much more choice for young people. I mean, when I was young, music was really everything to a young person. Now you've got video games, you've got the money you spend on your telephones, your mobile phones, there's just a lot more choice. So I think you just have to accept that life evolves and go with the flow.
Great. Todd?
Back to me. The fire at Necker Island. You had a lot of valuable information there, photos, notebooks, other information, so forth. Did you have it backed up? Did you learn something about security after the fire there?
Wonder why you asked that question. and I think I might give you the answer that you need. Yes, we did have it backed up, but the backup tapes, it just so happened, were in the house itself. So we should have gone to a decent company to have advised us better. I think, I was standing with Kate Winslet's kids just after they'd been rescued from the house, and we were standing 100 yards away in another building watching these 200-foot flames and the 90-mile-an-hour winds and the pouring rain, and just looking up there, and and I just said to the kids, none of these things really matter. Everything that's gone up in there is just stuff, and just thank God everybody's safe. And you do realize in the end that obviously you need to back up things from a business point of view, and it's stupid not to do it properly. But in the end, photographs, notebooks, diaries, even photo albums, they're lovely things to have, but as long as everybody's well and healthy, not that important.
No doubt family is the important thing, but we'll be there to help you on the next one.
Well, we'd be delighted to get some advice off you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Final question, Michael. So you mentioned that our kids could potentially be in a position where they might be able to choose space travel as a normal vacation. For the folks in this room, when the first passengers go up, what will the experience be like? How long will it take to get there? Will they be in a big space? What will they do when they get up there? Can you just describe what the experience is going to be like?
Well, our initial flights are suborbital flights, and then in future years we'll do orbital flights. So the initial flights, you will arrive at the spaceport, you will climb aboard the spaceship, which will be attached to the mothership, and you'll be flown up to 60,000 feet. The spaceship will then drop away from the mothership. By the way, you'll be strapped in at this stage. And the rocket will fire. You'll go from 0 to 3,000 miles an hour in 8 seconds. So you'll be on for the ride of a lifetime as you head off into space. Giant windows to look out of. And when you reach space, your sort of Jane Fonda, Barbarella type of air host stewardess will help you unbuckle your seats, and you'll be able to experience weightlessness. You'll be able to look back at the Earth in all its majesty, and you'll become an astronaut and just enjoy an incredible journey. And when you're ready to go back to Earth again, you will obviously buckle back in again. And the great advantage over the Virgin Galactic spaceship over a NASA spaceship is that instead of a NASA spaceship had to hit the Earth's atmosphere just at the right angle, otherwise it would burn up. With the Virgin Galactic spaceship, it effectively turns into a giant shuttlecock. And you come in, the pilots could be sound asleep. You come in as a giant shuttlecock through back into the Earth's atmosphere at about 4 or 5 times the speed of sound, but slowed up enough so there's no danger of burning up. But come back into a spaceship form when you come back in and come back down again, and hopefully have had a ride of a lifetime. And I just want to say thanks very much for he's great to talk to. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, Richard. It was a pleasure. What a great way to kick off Focus 11. This was fantastic. Great conversation. We certainly could go on, but we have a show to put on. And so please give Sir Richard a round of applause. Dave Milam will come up on stage. Pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miles.
Good. Excuse me.
All right. All right, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.
We have been working on a Virgin Space Hotel. The idea is to build it not on the moon, but just off the moon. And there would be these lovely glass pods, which would be your bedrooms, which you would sleep in and as you go around the moon. And then we'd have tiny little spaceships, where you could go off for a day ride around the moon. And we could
So this would be the place where you enter the 250,000 Mile High Club. And who would get to be first for that?
Look, my company's called Virgin. I don't know.
I see the business opportunity. There is no doubt.
Okay, this Virgin may go the whole way. We'll see.
All right, so Virgin Galactic, it's crazy, it's wild, outrageous, and it's fun. That's you, isn't it?
Yeah, I love to be. I think all of us really would love to be crazy, outrageous, and have fun and push the limits. And life's a lot more fun, when you do that. And I suppose I'm in, a fairly unique position where I can, set myself these fantastic challenges and try to make them possible.
So, as we said in the introduction, you were not a good student. You're dyslexic. You struggled in school. Were it not for that fact, you probably would have stayed in school. And you come from a long line of barristers. You would probably today be a barrister in the city, in bespoke and rather anonymous. Is that possible? Well, can you imagine in 1925 talking with somebody who is, flying airmail and saying someday there'll be a jumbo jet that will take you across the ocean? They would think you were crazy. So this is probably a pretty good analogy to where we are in the space program. I guess the question is, and I've seen you talk about this a little bit, can you ever see this as becoming a means of transportation, suborbital flights from New York to Tokyo, for example? Is that possible?
Yeah, I have to hold our engineers back at the moment. I mean, they're everywhere. It's like me. I'm always wanting to move on to the next project, but I'm just saying, look, we've got to finish our space project first. But I mean, the whole team of wonderful engineers that work at Virgin Galactic, they believe it will be possible to create spaceships that pop out into space and pop back down. I mean, I'm off to Australia tonight, so it's going to take me 21 hours. These engineers say that, they may well be able to do it in, so it could take 1.5 hours from, from Las Vegas to Australia. And I'm very much hoping that they can achieve that in our lifetimes, which would be spectacular. And what a ride.
What a ride that would be.
The only problem is the airport. I mean, by the time you got through security, it's 1.5 hours.
The TSA will take longer than the flight. Yeah. Let's, in September, end of September, you had a glide test. You've had about 16 of them, I think. And that was a real nail biter. It descended much more steeply than you anticipated. And in the end, it proved how safe the craft is as you were able to feather it and everybody landed safe. Family had planned a Christmas 2012 vacation to space. Is that going to happen?
I think so. I think we'll be finished and ready for next Christmas. And my kids have reached an age where they love to experience some of the adventures that I do together. So I'm very, very lucky as a father to be able to share these kinds of wonderful things with Holly and Sam. And then the following year, we should take more people to space in that 1 year on a commercial spaceship company than NASA and the Russians have taken to space in the last 70 years. So,
I know you know the number, but we should tell the crowd here that basically in the entire history of the space age, about 50 years or so, only about 500 people have gone to space.
Yeah.
And your wait list is about that length, right?
Yeah, I mean, by the end of this year, it will be 500. And I think our real challenge, I mean, the price these people are paying is not cheap. I mean, they are the pioneers. They're paying a couple $100,000 to go to space. But that's roughly the same price as it costs to cross the Atlantic in a Pan Am plane in the 20s. And they were the pioneers of transatlantic travel. I'm willing to forecast today that the people in this room's children, 20 years from now, they'll be thinking, should we go on holiday this year, or shall we go off into space? I mean, and that we'll be able to get the level of the costs down to a level where, most people's kids here will become astronauts. I mean, which is a fantastically exciting thing to think about.
Richard Branson. Welcome. Welcome so much. Glad to have you. Thank you very much. Great. All right. And here's Miles.
All right, sit down, make yourself comfortable. Thank you, David, and thank you all for being here this morning. You just flew in from Las Cruces, and boy, are your arms tired. You had quite a show yesterday. Tell us how it went. Tell us what you were doing at the spaceport in New Mexico.
Well, it was a historic day. We just finished building this beautiful-looking spaceport right out in the middle of the desert, and
kind of looks like a stingray.
What's that?
It looks like a stingray, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's maybe a stingray. I never thought of that, but it looks anyway out of this world, which it should, but it fits in really well in the desert, and that's where the whole space program is going to be launched from. So, how many people put their hands up?
Yeah, who wants to go?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
As long as we've
who's your bosses? Can we get your salaries up quick, please?
Everyone needs a raise here, I think. So, all right. I should tell you, I've got my Twitter feed open. @MilesO'Brien is my address on Twitter, and if you want to chime in with a question or a comment as we talk here, I'm going to guess this crowd has a lot of portable mobile devices. Safe to say? All very well secured, I'm sure, as well, too. So let's talk about how things are going. You have 455 people on the wait list, maybe 456 or 7 today, who knows, who have put down some money for this. How soon before they get to fly? I know you and your... Just tell us a little bit about that and give us a little insight into the challenges that you have encountered along the way here. It's a little bit harder than it looks, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're building a spaceship program from scratch, and you know, I mean, and NASA in building their spaceship program, you know, they had challenges. I mean, you know, they lost 3% of their customers. Generally speaking, at the re-entry stage, that's completely unacceptable. If you're a commercial spaceship company, you know, we have to. You know, we cannot afford to lose our customers because we may not get new customers. So, offering return tickets rather than one-way tickets is quite important. You know, but we have, you know, brave test pilots, who, you know, are putting the aircraft through their paces, and in the process, they push them to extreme situations, and you know, they might find the aircraft spins out of control because they've, you know, really pushed it, and you know. But the great thing about this spaceship is it's got backup mechanisms, and it can, you know, and all the backup mechanisms have worked, and I think, you know, by the time we finally fly passengers in, you know, 15 months' time, we will have done many flights. And many flights into space, and, you know, obviously we hope it goes without anybody getting hurt.
We have a tweet here. Do you envision space hotels in the near-term future?